I'm Getchin Share with HomesNet Realty, and I thank you for watching. And if this is your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing and click on the bell to be notified when I post new videos. In this episode of Let's Talk Real Estate, I will go over 20 questions, multiple choice questions, designed to help you pass the Florida real estate exam. Let's get right into it. Part 11, Real Estate Contracts. This is a heavily tested concept on the exam. It covers about 12 questions. So it's chapter 5, part 5, and part 11 are 12 questions each. So therefore, these are very, in those two, you have almost a quarter of the exam between those two chapters, 11 and 12. So this is discussing contract. And also just keep in mind, as a real estate agent, the contract is your bread and butter. This is where the rubber meets the road. So it's important that a real estate agent understand this concept. So we're going to try to address and see what and how to identify the questions. Remember, I said to you in the past, every question has the answer written into it. So some of you probably noticed that I underline certain words. Well, that is my cue to you how to read a question, trying to find the words that are important. And I continue to do the same thing here so you understand. And also I'm doing the fill in the blanks because the questions on the state exam are extremely straightforward. So you really must know the material call. So I'm presenting the information to you in a way that if you see it in that format, now there are no fill in the blanks, but all questions are multiple choice questions, but there are some questions that are stated. And for example, complete this answer. So complete this statement. So if you understand the question, if you know the concept, you can easily pick out the answer choice. That is the mindset behind this. I hope it's useful or helpful to you. So let's get started. Number one, all real estate sales contracts are considered to be blank, but are not blank. Here, what they're trying to test you is see if you understand the difference between validity, a valid contract, with an enforceable contract. Now, remember, this is really testing you about the statute of frauds. Statute of frauds says whenever you're selling or you're transferring your right in real estate, it must be in writing for it to be enforceable. Now, an oil contract can be valid, but you cannot go to court and enforce it. That is what they're saying to you. So if a person breached an oil contract, how does one enforce that in a courtroom? Number two, the parties to a real estate sales contract are the blank, who is the seller, and the blank, who is the buyer. If you remember, I shared with you, if you understand the concept between OR and EE, you will get many questions right. Again, you will see this just about everywhere on the exam. Now, a vendor is the seller. That is the person who is giving the title, who's giving title to someone else. And the vendee, who is the buyer, is the one receiving it. So EE is the receiver, OR is the giver. If you remember that in a previous video, I suggest you go back and watch the videos so you can see, you understand the concept. But it's important to understand that very simple concept. It will get you at least 12 to 14 questions on any exam if you understand that concept. Number three, an owner must be given a copy of the written listing contract within blank hours. Well, here we understand as a real estate agent, basically they're asking you, how soon after you sign the contract do you have to give it to the owner? Well, you must provide them with a copy within 24 hours. Number four, the type of listing that gives the broker the greatest degree of protection is the blank listing. Well, here we understand that is the exclusive right of sale listing. Here, the exclusive right of sale listing gives the brokerage the greatest protection because with the exclusive right of sale, so I usually tell my students to think of this question as When you see those words, exclusive right of sale, think of it as exclusive right to sell. That means ABC Realty is the only brokerage in this state, on this planet, that can sell that listing for the period of time stated. The only way a broker can basically not be protected is if the agents or the brokerage fail to do its job as promised under the contract. Because no matter who sells the property, the brokerage, ABC Realty, will get paid. Just keep that in mind. So exclusive right of sale provides the greatest protection to the brokerage. Number 5, damages specified on a contract are blank damages. Well, I want you to understand something. Whenever you see, when we talk about contracts, whenever you see the word damages, they're talking about money. So here, what kind of money that is specified in the contract? So I want to bring you back. When a buyer sees a property, the buyer makes an offer. Okay, but to entice the seller to accept that buyer's offer, to let that buyer know that, hey, listen, I'm very serious about buying this property. I'm not going to waste your time. In fact, I'm putting some money in escrow. Okay, that is what we call a good faith deposit, escrow deposit, earnest money deposit. That's the money that the buyer puts in the contract. And it is also implied, if the buyer breaches the contract, the seller can then go after that money. So that means it's liquidated. Liquidated means you are putting it on the line. It is specified, it is stated. So if I, as the buyer, fail to buy this property, you, seller, can keep that money. So it's already stated in the contract. Now, number 6, what is the status of an option without valuable consideration? So let's see what's important here. What is important? The words you need to focus on: an option contract without valuable consideration is void. So valuable consideration, again, think of it this way. If you have a tenant who is occupying a property, and the tenant likes the place and would like to buy the property, and they go to the landlord and say, listen, I love the property, I would like to buy the property, and I want to have an option to buy it within a specific period of time. Now, this person is asking the owner to preserve that right for them within the next, let's say, within the next 12 months. Okay, they're saying to the owner, you cannot sell this property to anybody else but me. You can see they have to give something of value for that consideration. So they have to pay consideration for the owner to reserve that for them. So without payment, it is void. Number 7, after negotiating all terms of a contract with a seller, a buyer signs the contract and then makes a minor change in the terms and conditions before it is presented to the seller for signatures. What is the status of the offer? Well, here, let's focus on the keywords. After negotiating all the terms. So all terms have been negotiated. The buyer signs the contract and then makes changes to the terms and conditions. What is the status? If he makes changes to an offer, then it is a counter offer. Number 8, Mr. Smith makes an offer to buy a property. The offer is accepted. 2 days before closing, Mr. Smith says, I am not Mr. Smith. I am Mr. Brown, and I do not want to close. The question is, which statement applies? So here, let's focus on the key words. Remember, Mr. Smith makes an offer to buy a property. Mr. Smith's offer is accepted. But before closing, Mr. Smith says, I don't want to close. Well, we know here the seller can sue for specific performance, but the seller can also sue for liquidated damages. Remember the money we talked about? That's an escrow. Now, if there are money in escrow, the seller can keep that money. The seller can sue for specific performance. Well, what is specific performance? is breaching the contract. And therefore, the seller can go to court and say to the court, hey, Mr. Smith, send me an offer. I accepted the offer. We had a contract. His promise to me under the contract is that he will buy my property. Now he's telling me he doesn't want to buy my property. I want you to force him to buy the property. Now, presumably, this question, there's no liquidated damages, speaking of, so that is not an option. So we'll go with specific performance. Number 9, complete the statement. Real estate commissions are usually based on the total sales price. Now, for example, you see, this is basically a fill in the blank, although they give you the option. So you have options here, but that is really a fill in the blank question. So you understand my concept behind that. So here, let's focus on the keywords. Real estate commissions are usually based on the total sales price, including encumbrances. Well, what does that mean, really? So usually when a person is selling a property, the owner of the property, the seller, usually has some kind of lien on the property, whether it's tax lien, mortgage lien, or any other kind of lien. Well, this is basically saying the real estate commission is based on the sales price. It's not based on the profit or the residual income that the seller gets from it. It includes everything. It doesn't matter. It's only based on the sales price. Number 10, a broker fails to fulfill the terms and condition as stated in the listing contract. The listing contract states that the broker will advertise weekly in the Palm Beach Post-Times and the Palm Beach Shining Sheet, which she or he has failed to do. What may the seller legally do? Well, here we understand. Let's focus on the key words. Okay, so what may the seller legally do if the broker failed to fulfill the terms as stated? And it's telling you she failed to fulfill the terms that she promised. She failed to fulfill the terms in the contract. The broker states that she will advertise weekly, but she failed to do that. We know in that case, the contract can be terminated with we know that the contract can be terminated with the broker because she or he breaches the contract. Before moving on, do me a favor, hover over this picture, click subscribe, and click on the bell to be notified when I post new videos. Number 11, complete this sentence. Valuable consideration, blank. Well, valuable consideration are basically promises. Could be a promise. Remember, when you have a buyer and a seller who are selling properties, basically what you have the buyer making a promise to the seller to pay the seller X amount. And that's a promise. And then you have the seller promising to transfer title ownership to the buyer if the buyer fulfill all the agreements. So here, that's what they're referring to. Number 11, complete this sentence. Valuable consideration, blank. Well, valuable consideration are basically promises. Could be a promise. Remember, when you have a buyer and a seller who are selling properties, basically what you have the buyer making a promise to the seller to pay the seller X amount. And that's a promise. And then you have the seller promising to transfer title ownership to the buyer if the buyer fulfill all the agreements. So here, that's what they're referring to. You valuable consideration could be something of value, but it is simply a promise. A contract is nothing more than two parties promising each other that they will do certain things within a specified time frame. Number 12, what type of listing contract best protects the broker? You understand here, that is the exclusive right of sale. Remember, exclusive right to sell. That's the best protection for the broker. Number 13, A broker has an exclusive right of sale listing to sell an owner's property with no other authority granted. What type of agency does the broker have with the principal? So here they're using some fancy words, principal. So we understand when you have a contract, whenever you have a contract with a seller or a buyer, doesn't matter. Whenever you have a contract with another person to represent you, that creates a principal agent relationship. So the agent is the brokerage, the principal is the seller. And here they're telling you the broker has an exclusive right to sell a property. No other authority is granted. Now, what type of agency is this? Well, if you go back, you understand the agency law, that is a special agency. Special agency means you only authorized to do one specific thing. It's like hiring a lawyer to get you a divorce. Once you get that divorce, their obligation to you is done. Well, same thing. If you have a brokerage to sell your property, that property is sold. The relationship is ended. It's one transaction. Number 14, a buyer who negotiates a contract to purchase property, takes possession, and pays the property purchase price in installments, but does not receive legal title until the full purchase price has been paid. What is this agreement called? So let's focus on the keywords. A contract to purchase property, pay in installments until full payment has been paid. This is called an installment contract, a contract for deed, or a land contract. All of those are the same thing. Number 15, which of the following establishes the time period for enforcement of a contract? Well, here we're talking about the statute of limitation. Time period for enforcement. That is a statute of limitation. We understand if the contract is in writing, the parties have 5 years to enforce the contract. If the contract is verbal or oral, then they have 4 years. That is what they're testing here. Number 16, a buyer makes a written offer to purchase. The seller changes the term or conditions, initials the changes, sign the contract, and send it back to the offeror. And in contract law, what is the seller's change contract? Well, we went over that. I just wanted to show you that is a different way that they can ask you the same question. Buyer makes an offer that is in writing. Seller changes the terms and condition. And we know in contract law, if you change terms and condition, it is a counter offer. Number 17, where is the right of the broker to accept earnest money on behalf of the seller created? Well, every authority that the broker has is created under the listing agreement. The listing agreement is the listing contract. So if you look at the key words there, right to accept earnest money on behalf of the seller, where is it created? Well, it's created in the listing contract. That's what authorizes the brokerage to negotiate on behalf of the seller or buyer for that matter. Number 18, a buyer makes an offer which the seller accepts. Before the broker can tell the buyer of the acceptance of his offer, the buyer dies. What is the most likely status of the contract? Well, here we understand. Let's read the keywords. Buyer makes an offer, seller accepts. Before broker can tell the buyer of the acceptance, he dies. Why? Because the buyer did not know the offer was accepted before he died. Well, he did not know, but his agent knew, but unfortunately, he cannot continue with the process because he's dead. That's the only reason why that would be a valid reason, okay? Number 19, what are the required elements of all valid contracts? Well, remember, we understand for a contract to be valid, so elements that are valid. For what are the elements for a valid contract? Well, we know a contract, for it to be valid, it must be for a lawful subject matter. And that's one thing that's there. We must have a meeting of the minds. In other words, we must have an agreement. Well, we have that there. And we must have consideration. Consideration can be promises. So we have consideration here, either something of value or a promise, right? Those are promises. And we must have competent parties, parties that are both legally competent and mentally competent. So here they're putting all of it together. They're telling you that, you know, competent parties. So here C is the full, complete list of things that require to be valid. And for lack of time, I would not go into each one of them to break it for you, but you understand why C is the correct answer. Number 20, a valid real estate sales contract requires all of the following except, well, this is again another except question. So here, real estate sales contract require all except, well, here, let's understand what they're saying. A real estate sales contract must have all of the following to be valid, but it doesn't need to have this. It doesn't have to have earnest money deposit. It's a substantial. Well, you don't have to put money, earnest money deposit, escrow deposit, or good faith deposit for a contract to be valid. It's not important. It's only important because you want to tell the seller that you are serious, okay? That is your good faith. I'm putting money on the line because I'm serious and I want you to choose me above any other offer you receive, but it is not a requirement. So let's look at the valid. So a contract, let's look at A, an offer and acceptance and communicated to all parties. Well, that is meeting of the minds, and the meeting of the minds is communicated to all parties. That is true. Let's look at C, a written form. Well, we know based on statute of frauds, you need for whenever you're transferring your rights in real estate, it must be in writing to be enforceable. So we know that, and we know we have to have signatures of all the parties. So everything A, C, and D, we need those to have a valid contract. However, we do not need a contract to have earnest money deposit. Earnest money deposit is not required for it to be valid. Well, this one may be slightly over 20 minutes. I'm not sure, but I'll let you know. Again, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, and like. This is really the way you can support me is by subscribing. And as always, I thank you for watching. Have a blessed and wonderful day.